Hi, we are back for part two of infancy and toddlerhood risk factors and protective factors. I had way more than 15 minutes of content for the risk factors, so unfortunately, I had to make two videos because I wanted to make sure that I got the information in for the risk factors, and I'm going to wrap it up in this one and do the protective factors. So we had mentioned the three risk factors, or just not the only three, but three risk factors I wanted to focus on and that the textbook focused on were poverty, inadequate caregiving, and maltreatment and trauma. And we discussed how those could impact development of a child during this stage. So all is not lost. Just because those things exist does not mean a child is screwed for the rest of his life. There are things that can occur during this stage which can not necessarily compensate, but kind of partner and walk alongside with families who might be in poverty or have some of these risk factors present. Or the protective factors might be present in a non-risky situation as well. So there's four protective factors that I'm going to go over. Again, it's not just these four, but these are four important ones, and they kind of align with how social workers can partner with families and individuals in this stage to kind of provide some of these things. And so these really align well with the social work profession. So the first one is maternal education. And so there are a lot of programs connected with doctors' offices, with social service agencies called maternal and infant programs, so MIP, which also stands for minor in possession. But for this, it's mother and infant programming. And so maternal infant programs provide mothers with information on development in utero, helps walk through the first 1 to 2 years of a child's life, talking about breastfeeding, signs of normal development. A lot of these can be funded through the CDC or through the local health department. I know that after I had my last two children, I got something automatically sent to me in the mail from the health department talking about healthy beginnings. And again, like I mentioned before, like I am not currently in any of those risk factor, besides being super stressed out half the time, I'm not in those risk factor categories. And so it is just something that the health department sends out to provide for everybody. I had zero idea what I was doing with my first child. So I have 5 kids, but the oldest 3 are my stepchildren, and they were not in infancy or toddlerhood when I came into their lives. So this was all new for me when I had my first, Quinn. She's actually 3 today when I'm recording this. It's her birthday. And so I had no idea what to do in what was normal development. I didn't know how to breastfeed. I didn't even know what was like a normal infant feeding schedule. And so the education that my OB office gave me just automatically was wonderful. It kind of ties into the social support piece. People in my life who had children gave me books to read, gave me advice. Honestly, I Googled a lot. That was actually really helpful too. But mothers or families who have really strong social supports tend to have really good developmental outcomes for their children, just because there's more resources being poured into the child's life. And so it might not necessarily be family or neighbors or friends, but it could be social services. So getting assistance through a caseworker with DHS, having food stamps, having WIC. So WIC will provide access to formula for, I believe, for free. And so being able to get the proper nutrition and not having to worry about if a child is going to go hungry because you're able to afford it. There's just the social support, even mentally, for parents, knowing that they're not alone and they don't have to necessarily do this all by themselves, can be huge and significant. So when my last child was born, she's the 5th girl in a family, and so trying to meet the needs of all of the older kids and also meet the needs of an infant, I had wonderful social supports with my neighbors, and they would come and they would take Ivy, she's my youngest, instead of having to put her in the car and drag her to go pick up kids from the doctor's appointments or school or activities and spending all that time in her car seat, they would take her and they would play with her and kind of pour love into her. And for me, that like relieved some of the like guilty feelings of, oh, I'm just ignoring my child, it was really great to have that. So social supports can be good mentally, but also as far as just like being an additional resource for parents and then for the children. Easy temperament is also a protective factor, and this really doesn't necessarily have to do with anything a parent's doing or anything like that. Some children are just born with very easy temperaments. They're very easygoing. They're very adaptable. That is my Ivy, my 6-month-old, 5.5-month-old to a T. She is the chillest baby ever, which is great, but also bad sometimes because we but like she'll just be hanging out and the other children are barking louder, and so they get their needs met, and Ivy's just chilling. And she's just really adaptable, and it does not faze her. Easy temperament is harder when a child is born into a chronically stressful environment, as we talked about in the risk factors, because children that are exposed to some of that stress in the womb and they come out kind of predispositioned to stress. And so easy temperament does have some connection to how development goes on in the womb, but sometimes it's just pure genetics and pure luck. And honestly, I think it's God knowing that if I had a fussy baby, I would lose my mind, and I needed to have one with an easy temperament. And so with her having an easier temperament, I don't get as stressed at her. I don't get as frustrated. And so our interactions are more healthy and wonderful because I'm able to focus on her versus how overwhelmed I am feeling. And so that can really help with just good development and good social interactions and good attachment. Another protective factor is good national and state policy. The United States is the only developed country who does not provide a paid maternity leave for mothers. As a working mother, I get real fired up about this. Not everybody is quite as passionate about it as me. But it's something that can be very detrimental to child development because mothers may return to work sooner than is healthy for the child and mother bond. It can cause financial strain on a family if the mother is not having any income for the time that she's on maternity leave, because you can take up to 12 weeks off with FMLA if your workplace has that and you're eligible for it. So you can take up to 12 weeks off, but that's unpaid. The only way that you can get paid is through short-term disability if they offer that with your agency as well, and that's really only up to 60% of your income for like an 8-week period of time. It's pretty interesting to see what our policy is. And so other developed countries have paid maternity leave. Some countries let the mother take up to a year, which actually kind of blows my mind. And so when you have an environment that promotes bonding with the mother and the child, or the parent and the child, that has strong WIC, maternal infant programs, any type of good service that focuses at development at this age is only going to help the family unit be supported, and then that will naturally help the child feel safe and secure and have good attachment and have good physical and cognitive development as well. So for social workers, if there's someone who's interested in like more macro social work and so policy development or advocacy, this is a huge arena that a social worker could get involved in, because as we're kind of learning through reading and through the lectures, that development right off the bat is so important for children and can have a great impact for the rest of their life. And so this is a really vital piece of advocacy that social workers should be aware of and have, if it's something that they are passionate about, could get involved in, but also just to be aware of the impact that poor policy and service structure could have on development of children. All right, that's protective factors. Obviously, there's a lot more, but it's really good to know that like there's ways to overcome negatives that might be present and that provide more of a risk for development. But those are just a few protective ones, and it's good news to me that there's always a strength in something, and that just because there's a negative situation from the start, that things can't be overcome, and that children are resilient and can kind of, not necessarily power through, that's kind of a casual statement, but kind of resist and kind of go through and overcome some of the challenges they might have faced during their early years at no fault of their own. So that's risk factors, and that is all.